Welcome, Exiles. So I've been experimenting with the new skill Kinetic Fusillade recently, like many others in the community, and I figured I'd chip in and showcase my approach and week 1 progress so far with it. I decided to try and stack Int right off the bat as a first character, and despite my initial setup being super scuffed and my current setup being kind of average, the skill still performs marvelously well and carried me all the way through the entire endgame. I did come across a few problems, but nothing really that major. Initially, I assumed that this skill would function similar to its PoE 2 predecessor, where bossing would feel incredible and mapping would be lacking, but I was kind of surprised that it was the opposite. The fact that this skill gets +3 chains for free made mapping an absolute breeze. Its boss damage isn't the worst thing in the world, but at least it's better than KB, I suppose. Now, I'll leave the POV of my character set up in the video description if you guys want to check it out, but keep in mind that it is still fairly scuffed since this is going to be an int stacking build, and there will be tons of upgrades to get in the upcoming days. A lot of things will more than likely change. With that out of the way, let me show you the gear. I'll start off with the essentials. We want to get a warp timepiece amulet with window of opportunity anoint, a time clasp ring with reduced skill effect duration, and a dusk ring on the left slot. The idea here is simple. We want to get as much reduced skill effect duration as possible, and that's it. The reason we need as much of this mod as possible is because Kinetic Fusillade is an attack skill that doesn't directly attack when you click the button. Instead, it generates projectiles which hover around you for a duration, and after the duration expires, they shoot out. However, if the duration hasn't expired and you're pressing or holding the skill, it will just infinitely keep generating new projectiles and they won't ever shoot out. So we want to decrease the duration as much as possible, and ideally we want it to be lower than our attack time, so we can freely spam or hold the button without interrupting the projectiles from shooting. Also, if you can't afford a decent dusk ring, just get a second time clasp ring and you should be good to go. Since we're going to be in-stacking, we want to get a wand with spell damage and flat added lightning damage mods that scale with how much intelligence we have. This is going to be our primary source of scaling for our damage, so whenever you can afford one of these wands, you should definitely get it. Until then, just run a regular wand with flat added lightning damage and whatever other useful mods you can get your hands on. This league, GGG introduced new equipment that we can use called grafts, which give us new abilities and buffs. The abilities are kind of mediocre, but the grafts that provide us with buffs are absurdly strong. For our build in particular, we want to grab a graft with Overcharged Sinews buff. This buff gives us jolt stacks when we crit. It stacks up to 10 and it provides us with 2% more maximum attack damage and 1% increased damage taken per stack. The suffixes on the grafts generally complement the ability or buff that they provide, and for this base in particular, they give additional buffs per stack. We can choose between getting crit chance per stack, crit multi per stack, more maximum attack damage per stack, or just straight up more overall stacks. Personally, I've opted into using crit chance and crit multi for now because the build isn't tanky enough to withstand another 10% increased damage taken. Later on, I'll probably swap to one with crit multi and % more max attack damage though for min-max purposes. The rest of the stats on the grafts you can get as you see fit, and since we can't use two grafts with the same skill, we want to just grab any secondary graft that has spell damage and whatever other useful mods. On the belt, I'm using a Prism Weave. This is a pretty generic early game damage belt, so feel free to swap it with a rare belt or any other belt you like. For our shield, we want to get as much attack block as possible, along with other useful mods like ES, Resists, and Int. We won't be attack blocked early on, but having a shield with massive amounts of block chance contributes an insane amount to our overall survivability. The rest of the gear is primarily focused on fixing resists and getting as much ES and Int as possible. The only Eldritch mod you should look for is lightning exposure on hit on the gloves, and the other ones you can settle with whatever useful mods RNGesus would bless you with. These are the flasks I'm using right now. My main goal was to get CB immunity on one of them and chance to gain a flask charge on crit on all of them. And recently I got a Dying Sun drop from the Feared, which I slotted instead of the quartz flask, but of course feel free to change them as you wish. Now it's time for the tree. There's nothing too crazy in here just yet. I've mostly been focusing on getting jewels, spell block, power charges, int, damage, and mana reservation efficiency, and I've been preparing to transition into large cluster jewel stacking. I haven't gotten to that last part just yet though, as you can see, since those jewels are kind of expensive because Elementalist is super popular this league, but I'll more than likely have them set up by next week. The current jewels I'm using are generic flat added damage abyss jewels. They're super good in the early and mid game for wonder builds, and they're very cheap to get, so you should definitely try and grab some for now. The ascendancy I've opted into using is Elementalist. The main reason for it is because of the golem buffs being super overpowered in the early game when gear is hard to come by, but later down the line, Deadeye or Occultist would more than likely end up being way stronger, since there's not really anything that the Elementalist has that would make it stand out more than those other two ascendancies when using wander skills. As for the gems, on Kinetic Fusillade, we want to have less duration, volatility, greater volley, increased crit damage, and sacred wisps. Less duration is a must-have since it'll provide us with a bulk of our duration reduction and make the Fusillades really feel like an actual skill. Volatility is extremely good for lightning damage based builds because it buffs the high end damage by a ton and the low end doesn't really matter that much. Greater volley will provide us with 4 additional projectiles, which is massive for this attack skill. Increased crit damage is a no-brainer since we're a crit based build, and sacred wisps will basically provide us with near double damage against bosses. For my travel skill, I'm using lightning warp with less duration and faster casting. This is mostly just a personal preference, and you can absolutely use Frostblink or Shield Charge if you like those more, but I figured we don't get to use Lightning Warp that often because it's also a duration based ability like Kinetic Fusillade, so why not have some fun with it. Assassin's Mark with Mark on hit for extra crit and damage against rares and bosses. We have Discipline, Wrath, and Herald of Ice linked to Enlighten level 3, and Precision with Tempest Shield. I have Arctic Armor equipped by the way, but as you saw from the earlier clips, I'm not really using it at the moment, so feel free to replace it with something else. And finally, we'll be using Flame Golem, Lightning Golem, Ice Golem, Stone Golem, Vitality, and Herald of Thunder. That's about it for the build in its current setup. Hope you guys like it and you have fun with it if you decide to give it a try. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you liked the video and you wish to see my future PoE content, and I'll see you all in the next video. Stay sane, exiles.